cost and the benefits. And nobody seems to be able to quantify the costs. They just say, keep throwing money at it, throwing money at it, throwing money at it. And nobody can really quantify the benefits, except if we don't do it, then we're all going to die. And when I go back to my people and say, your electricity costs have gone up 30%, but it's for a good cause. Why, Kennedy? Because you're going to die if we don't do it. Why, Kennedy? Because a professor at Princeton says so. That doesn't work for most Americans. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to all our witnesses. I'm sorry I was late. I was in another committee. How many of you drive an electric car, own an electric car? Okay. You gentlemen don't?
If you mean electric by a battery electric, no. If you mean plug-in electric, yes.
Okay. Of the three folks who raised their hands, how many do you own gasoline-powered cars at all? No?
No, Senator.
No, all electric. Okay. Let me ask you all this, and please give me brief answers, because there are five of you, there's only one of me. Okay? If electric cars are so swell, how come we have to pay people to drive them?
The upfront costs of an electric vehicle are about $10,000 higher today than they are for an equivalent internal combustion engine vehicle today, but that cost is declining substantially. Right. And so this is a temporary intervention to help the auto industry strategically compete in global markets and to transition as battery costs fall.
You didn't hear my admonition, okay?
Sorry.
Doc, how about if electric vehicles are so swell, how come we have to pay people to drive them?
I think sorry, Senator, I'll step away.
I'm sorry, I can't see the names.
Oh, it's Gross, Ms. Gross here. I'll defer to not comment on policy questions about incentives and so on. Maybe
Tell
pass
me
it off
your
to
name. I
Ms.
can't
Hinman.
see your name tag.
Gross? I can switch.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I can swivel it.
I apologize. Would you start over?
I was just going to say I'd like to defer on policy grounds not to talk about policy incentives and so on, defer over to my
Why not?
colleague here, Ms. Hinman.
You don't believe in electric cars?
Oh, totally support electric vehicles and drive 3 of them myself.
So if they're so swell, how come we're having to pay people to drive them?
So just speaking personally, then, not representing my company at this point.
Sure.
Speaking personally.
Who's your company?
EPRI, the Electric Power Research Institute.
Oh, okay.
And I have to be careful about policy stepping into, wading too deeply into policy as an independent leader here. But when we think about, again, I just want to ditto what Dr. Jenkins said. This is an effort to compete
Yes, ma'am,
globally.
I know all that, but how, if they're so swell, how come we have to pay people to drive them?
Well, maybe then the quick answer for me is I didn't take advantage of incentives, but I also bought used vehicles on the market. I love it. They're wonderful to drive. And so on.
Okay.
Senator, similar for myself.
What's your name?
Maureen Hinman.
Damn.
My hair's longer in my picture, sorry.
I'm sorry, I don't even know who I'm talking to. Go ahead, Ms. Hinman.
I did want to follow up with my colleague, Ms. Gross. I purchased my first EV. Fully
Yes, ma'am, but if they're so swell, how come we have to pay people to drive them?
Well, I can only speak for myself, but we purchased our first vehicle in 2015 because it was easier to charge, cheaper to drive. It drives better, faster, smoother. There's no muck on the bottom of our garage. And frankly, when I had my first child, some of the safety features were just better.
But here's what I'm sorry, you're not answering my question. How many vehicles, how many cars do we have in the United States?
280.
This lady right here, in the middle. I'm sorry, if I could see your name, I wouldn't just point to you.
If I could, I'd like to defer to my colleague who
Well,
has
I'd like to
better.
hear your answer, okay?
How many calls?
How many cars are there?
295 million?
Okay, and what percentage are electric vehicles?
1.6.
Okay, hold up that chart. Here's where all electric vehicles are. California loves them. The West Coast loves them. Everybody else is kind of lukewarm. Okay, I'm trying to understand why. But let me move on to this. Let me ask these two gentlemen. I think the reason is because they're more expensive. And people, when they drive a car, like it to run. And when it runs out of electricity, it stops. And they can't find a place to charge. So let me ask these two gentlemen. I don't want to be unfair. So it's clear we got a long way to go. We got 283 million cars in America, and we got 3.3 million electric vehicles. We got a long way to go. And at least these three folks think that we need to take taxpayer money and give enough money to American people so they'll walk away from gas cars and drive electric vehicles. How much is that going to cost? I'm going to ask them in a second if I have time. But How much do you think it will cost for us to basically bribe every American to drive an electric car?
Well, Senator, excuse me, Dave Sweeter with the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. I would just underscore your original question with this. There's really two things at play as it relates to what's
How much
happening.
money do you think it'll cost
Costs
to
are
bribe the American people enough to make them drive electric cars, to move those numbers?
Electrification's increasing as it relates to cost. Only a fraction of currently eligible
How much do you
vehicles
think
are
it'll
eligible
cost?
for the federal tax credit. So
How much do you think it'll cost, David?
Senator, I think I quoted earlier
I'm
that,
calling on you, sir.
Apologies.
How much do you think it'll cost?
it ultimately depends on
You
consumer
don't know,
adoption.
do you?
We don't have an exact figure.
You think,
no,
well,
Senator.
just keep throwing money at it until we hit the jackpot? How about you, Mr. Davis?
Eventually, if you put enough charging stations there to solve for range anxiety, because the reason I didn't buy one is because I may have to drive 450
How
miles
much
to
do you
East
think
Tennessee.
it'll
It's not
cost the American taxpayer for us to convince the American people, frankly, bribe the American people to get rid of the gas car and drive an electric car? Can any of you give me a figure?
Senator, the Treasury Department reports we spent about $1 billion year to date. So for the first half of this year, so roughly $2 billion this
Well,
year.
we're behind.
As I noted,
How much do you think it'll cost, Doctor? You're a doctor,
so
right?
$2 billion this year is what the estimate from the Treasury
Okay,
Department.
How much do you think it will cost for us to, let's say, get 75% of these 200?
How much will it cost American consumers to remain?
How much, do you know how much it'll cost, Doctor?
No one knows the future with certainty, Senator.
Right, you just think we ought to keep throwing money at it until we hit the jackpot?
I think we ought to set a stable policy framework that allows American consumers to become familiar with the environment and American businesses to innovate and to compete within that stable framework. That's what I said
And how
earlier in
much
my
will that
testimony.
cost?
Will cost less than the benefits delivered by
You
the
don't
policy.
care how much it costs, do you?
I care if the benefits exceed the cost. I don't care about the cost.
You
These are
don't care how
investments
much
in the
it
public.
costs, do you?
I care very much how much it costs as long as the benefits exceed the cost. That's an investment worth making.
Well, so, okay.
How much
so
does it cost to seed the industries of the future
I-
to China?
I get to ask the questions, Doc.
Sorry.
You're at Princeton, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. How are Jewish students doing at Princeton? Are they feeling better?
That has nothing to do with the hearing today. I'm
I
not going
didn't
to
think
comment on
you'd
that.
want, I didn't think you'd want to talk about that. Do any of you have any idea how much it would cost
Senator,
to get, say, 75% of the American people
Senator,
driving electric cars?
if I could, your question is fair. One answer to it is the cost of inaction of the U.S. not competing is far greater than any incentive on the front
Okay,
end.
quantify that for me. Oh, man, I'm way over. I'm sorry, Sheldon. Quantify that for me, because here's
Why
my
don't you,
pro-
why don't you wrap up with this, because I think
I will.
everybody's had a chance to try to
I will.
answer your question, and
Here's
you're
my
repeating
problem.
it at this
Okay,
point.
we all want clean air, we all want bright water, we all want to eat, and we all want to live indoors. Okay? But there are trade-offs in all of this. Despite what the Princeton professor thinks, we don't have unlimited money. This is not Princeton. So we have to decide the cost and the benefits. And nobody seems to be able to quantify the costs. They just say, keep throwing money at it, throwing money at it, throwing money at it. And nobody can really quantify the benefits, except if we don't do it, then we're all going to die. And when I go back to my people and say, your electricity costs have gone up 30%, but it's for a good cause. Why, Kennedy? Because you're going to die if we don't do it. Why, Kennedy? Because a professor at Princeton says so. That doesn't work for most Americans. Can you answer that for me? You see my frustration. I love driving an electric car. I think they're really cool. But the median household income in my state's $55,000. Our Princeton professor probably makes that in a week. Okay? They don't care what they think at Princeton. Can you answer that for me, guys?
I can't answer how much it's going
Good.
to cost, but I can tell you that just last year alone, China in the EV market subsidized it by $12.4 billion, and that's their annual spend. It's more than, even with in our best year, it's more than
And
two-thirds of the
China's
United
doing
States
great.
spends.
But let me ask you a question. How much will it cost China to become carbon neutral by 2050?
I am very concerned, well, they won't, but I'm more concerned about the
How much
risk
would
to
it
the
cost
U.S.
them?
economy of
How
losing
much
the
would
auto
it-
manufacturing
How much would it
industry.
cost them? Do you know? See, nobody talks about the cost. I'll tell you how much it'll cost them. It'll cost them $1 trillion a year, starting today, to be carbon neutral by 2050. You know how much it'll cost Russia? $250 billion a year, 3 times what their defense budget. Now, if you believe that Vladimir Putin is going to spend $250 billion for climate change, then you'll never own your own home. So we go spend all this money, which y'all can't quantify. We just keep spending. They don't spend the money. They're at an advantage, and you know how much world temperatures are lowered? None. Zero, zilch, nada. And I can't believe our chairman hadn't cut me off. But I am done.
Now's your moment. Thank you, Senator Kennedy, for your enthusiastic participation.
In that final exchange, the air in the chamber seemed to tighten. Senator John Kennedy, with his trademark blend of humor, sharp skepticism, and folksy bluntness, turned the hearing into a cross-examination of an idea, not of a person. If electric cars are so swell, he asked again and again, how come we have to pay people to drive them? It wasn't just a question about vehicles. It was a question about faith, faith in policy, in government direction, in the grand promises of progress. What unfolded wasn't merely a debate about subsidies or technology. It was a portrait of an America split between vision and reality. On one side, engineers, economists, and advocates spoke of transition, innovation, and competition with China. On the other, Kennedy pressed the unspoken truth of millions of working families, that ideals mean little when the electric bill rises, when wages stagnate, when hope costs more than a tank of gas. The hearing room became a mirror of the national divide, a clash between those who believe government must lead the way forward and those who fear that leadership, unchecked, becomes compulsion. The senator's voice, sharp yet steady, cut through the language of reports and incentives, pulling the conversation back to the kitchen table. To families who count every dollar, to small towns far from charging stations, to the Americans who can't afford to gamble on a policy experiment. Behind every exchange, behind every non-answer from the witnesses, there was something deeper, a quiet confession of uncertainty. No one could say what it would cost. No one could say how much, or how long, or how far. We don't know, they said. We can't predict. And Kennedy, relentless, seized on that uncertainty like a thread unraveling a tapestry. Then why, he asked, are we still throwing money at it? That moment revealed the heart of modern governance, where ambition often runs faster than arithmetic, and where moral imperatives like clean air and global leadership collide with the limits of debt and patience. It was a cinematic snapshot of democracy itself, messy, raw, filled with conviction and contradiction. The senator's frustration wasn't just political, it was existential. He spoke for those who feel forgotten by a system that spends billions in the name of tomorrow, while the problems of today, housing, healthcare, wages, remain unsolved. The witnesses, each representing institutions of research, energy, and industry, spoke with cautious optimism. They defended incentives as strategic investments, as temporary interventions. They spoke of competing with China, of future cost curves, of markets not yet born. But their words carried the faint hum of detachment, the language of policy briefings, not lived experience. Kennedy's rebuttal landed like a cold wind in that sanitized space. He reminded them that America is not a laboratory. It's a country of people who work hard, pay taxes, and expect honesty about what those taxes buy. And then, in a moment of almost theatrical contrast, he turned to the Princeton professor, asking not about kilowatts or carbon credits, but about Jewish students, about safety, about fear. It was abrupt, maybe even jarring, but symbolic. In that question was the reminder that behind every policy are people, that the nation's moral temperature matters as much as its environmental one. His pivot was more than rhetorical. It was a challenge to the academic distance that so often defines our national debates. When he finally closed, his voice cutting through the tension, the hearing ended, not with clarity, but with a lingering unease. "We don't have unlimited money," he said. "This is not Princeton." The line carried more than sarcasm. It was a warning. In a world where governments print solutions faster than results, where billions flow without measurable change, where slogans replace substance, Kennedy's words became a kind of reluctant conscience. The numbers echoed through the room like a verdict. 283 million cars in America. Only 3 million electric. $1 trillion for China's neutrality goals. 0 reduction in world temperature. And in those numbers lay the heart of his argument, that good intentions are not the same as good governance, that leadership without accountability becomes indulgence, that belief in the future must never blind us to the cost of the present. When Kennedy spoke of the median household income in Louisiana, $55,000, the conversation stopped being theoretical. It became human. It became about the mother commuting to work in an old sedan, the father repairing a 15-year-old truck, the young family whose dreams are postponed by inflation and debt. It became about the people who will never sit at a Senate witness table, the people for whom government is not an idea, but a bill that arrives every month. And yet beneath the frustration there was a paradoxical hope, the hope that someone, anyone, is still willing to ask the questions that make power uncomfortable. Because democracy survives not through consensus, but through confrontation, not through silence, but through scrutiny. In that chamber, amid the glare of cameras and the polite evasions of experts, one senator reminded America that transparency is not a nuisance. It's a necessity. That skepticism is not cynicism. It's the pulse of freedom. And as the gavel fell, the echoes of his words lingered, not as partisan noise, but as the voice of accountability calling from within the machine. Whether you agreed with him or not, the moment demanded reflection. How far should government go in shaping markets? How much faith should we place in promises we can't measure? And who will speak for those left behind in the march toward progress? Because progress, stripped of conscience, becomes arrogance. And arrogance, left unchecked, becomes policy. In the end, the hearing wasn't just about electric cars. It was about the electricity of power itself. Who controls it, who pays for it, and who dares to question its current. As the lights dim and the room empties, one truth remains. The future cannot be bought. It must be earned, with honesty, with humility, with accountability. And that is the promise of democracy. Not perfection, but the courage to ask why before we decide how much. Music rises, solemn and resolute. This is liberal freedom, where we look deeper, where we challenge power, where we remind America that truth is not partisan and accountability is patriotic. Subscribe to liberal freedom, because democracy only survives when someone dares to narrate it.